What's up, guys? It's John Dominique, the Soul Proponent. Today I want to talk about developing the mindset for taking the path to the soul. I notice there's a lot of people who aren't ready. And I'm not saying everybody needs to be ready or willing to take the path. It takes a certain mentality, it takes a certain mind frame and a mindset. There needs to be a willingness and a readiness and a humbleness to be able to take the path without having the attitude of vulnerability, of the willingness to let go. I don't think it's a good idea to take the path because it usually just has the opposite effect. It strengthens the ego personality and its tendencies. And on the path, that's pretty common. I'm not saying to reject the fact that the ego is strengthening in itself and it's inadvertently making things worse, because that'll make things worse by itself if we're rejecting the fact that things are getting worse. That's how it starts. We need to see that. But the attitude and the mentality that we approach it with has to be one of vulnerability. It has to be one of allowing, one of accepting. It's not about trying to avoid what we think is going to make us uncomfortable. We have to allow the insecurity and the deficiencies that we feel. And these are very sensitive areas. A lot of people have issues from feeling abandoned when they were young children. They kind of turn their backs on a part of themselves that they left behind in childhood, and they feel betrayed, like the universe stopped caring about them, and that God isn't there for them. God was never there for them. But when they were children, they didn't have that type of that attitude or that mentality towards the universe. They were naturally joyful. And as we become adults, there's a twist, there's a shift that happens there. So developing the mindset for walking the path involves looking at our internal unconscious psychological shortcomings, our blocks and our barriers. And one of the barriers is feeling abandoned when we were younger, and that feeling of lack of support, because that's what it brings. There's no support for the way we want to live and for that young part of us that we cherish so dearly, that we hold a place in our hearts for. Like, we feel like it's gone, it's never going to come back, and God betrayed us. That's part of the path. We have to work through some of these issues. So developing the mindset is about allowing the vulnerability, allowing for us to feel the pain of walking the path and feeling the pain of our past wounds, because we are carrying a lot of old wounds in our psyches that a lot of times are unconscious. We're not aware how they're affecting us and how they're holding us back. So we revisit these wounds that happened to us in our childhood largely, and during our adulthoods as well. But we need to allow ourselves the space and the compassion for this healing to happen. And that begins by becoming aware of the wounds that we carry and the unconscious lack of self-worth and that type of those types of issues that we need to work through. So developing the attitude and the mentality and the mindset of walking the path has a lot to do with our attitude and our approach. We have to have that mentality of allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and open, and it's a very sensitive area that a lot of people will fight viciously to avoid this process, because the levels of vulnerability are unbearable. So I'm not saying we have to allow this to happen at once, but we can slowly allow ourselves to be more and more vulnerable in certain times, in certain spaces, and to allow that to develop and to allow that to grow and to develop the inner fortitude to give ourselves the space to allow things to unfold. So, for instance, there's this critic, the inner critic, judgment. There's this character that we carry, that we've inherited from our parents and from society, called the judge. And the judge is always there with this force. It's in the background of our lives, invisible, but it's always there judging us, telling us you're no good, giving us suggestions according to what it thinks our value is. If we're doing good, it thinks you're valuable. If you're doing something or something happens that's bad, it thinks you don't have any value. And so it's like this up and down roller coaster. We think that's normal. But we need to challenge that, and we need to allow ourselves to see this process of judgment and how it influences us and how it blocks us from the process of spiritual awakening. That's one example. And the attitude to allow that is, we have to be humble enough and open enough and allowing and accepting enough to see that this is a thing. Some people just want to sweep it under the rug because it feels too difficult. They don't want to deal with it. It's painful. They don't want to deal with the pain that's underneath all that and the fears. But the path is to almost just allow those fears, to allow them to overtake you. We think a lot of times that the fear and the pain is going to last forever. That's not necessarily true. We need to just allow the pain and the fear to overwhelm us and continue to overwhelm us and feel it in its entirety until it dissipates, because in the end that's what's going to happen. It's not going to last forever. But we need to see that for ourselves in our own experience and actually have a first-hand direct experience of this. It's not just mental. We can't think our way through it. This is a thing that we have to experience directly, firsthand, in our hearts, in our minds, in our consciousness, in our awareness. And the mentality is not being so proud that we think we already know the answers. We think there is no God. Most people honestly just don't know, and that's okay. We have to be be okay with not knowing, because that's one of the first steps. There's not any control. We're gonna have to know that we don't know. We don't know the way. We don't know the path. We don't know what's going to happen. It's out of our control. And it's not about, another thing some people have a problem with developing the mindset is that they think they can get something out of the process. They think that this process is supposed to work for them in a certain way to get them something good and avoid something bad. And that's a materialistic attitude. That attitude is attachment. Okay? The path is letting go of our need to control anything. It's not about, this religion, if it doesn't bring me the feeling of something good, if it doesn't work for me in the ways that I want it to, if it doesn't bring me material rewards, then it's not for me. That's not the path. The path is about allowing the truth to use you. You don't use the truth for your own good and your own gain and your own benefit. It's the other way around. So it's a sacrificing. It's a giving away consistently all the time. That attitude and that mentality is a huge shift for most people, because it's usually the ego personality has it the other way around. It's trying to grab, it's trying to reach, it has these needs and deficiencies, and it feels like it has to compensate for its feelings of lack. And that becomes an issue because it's almost like a negative attachment. We're resisting the process of allowing the lack and the deficiencies to be there and allow them to show us the entirety of what they are. So we identify with those lacks and deficiencies on an unconscious level, and so the ego is there to survive. So it overcompensates. It has to reach and grab, and it becomes very intense about it. And we need to watch that intensity, and we need to see that the intensity of our attachments is the direct opposite of what the path is the direct mentality that we need to walk the path. So developing the mentality is a lot of work. It's a lot of being aware consistently all the time in our lives and seeing examples and seeing every single example, inquiring into these examples and seeing why and how they're operating to keep us off the path, and see how they become blocks and barriers to the path to spiritual awakening. So developing the mentality, developing the mindset is a very important part. It's almost, if you can get this step down, then the rest of it takes care of itself, basically. And the pride that we have, to put aside our pride. We have to put aside our preconceived notions. We have to put aside everything we think we know. It's a sacrifice and a letting go. Developing the mindset is very crucial, the most crucial aspect of walking the path to the soul. John Dominique, the soul proponent.